Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. This is the internet's #1 comedy podcast, talking about the ways that technology is shaping culture. I'm one of your hosts. I go by the name Alexander Apricot Pepsi Holland, sat in Berlin, Germany, and sat down in deep down dirty Melbourne town. He's my co-host. He's the #1 tenured professor of podcasting, and he's got to be the one called
John Junior Boost Maloney.
John Junior Boost Maloney.
I promise not to use this effect for the whole podcast, but just for this little bit of intro. I want to thank Yamaha for the pitch
shifting machine that
comes with my sound card.
Now, John, I wanted to start with a little bit of a fun story.
Yeah. Before you do, can I just get you to do maybe an Italian accent in a high register and then a German accent in a low register?
Sure. I'm trying to get my little bit of a southern Italian accent.
Buongiorno, principessa. It's me, Alexander Holland, and I always go into Russian. Buongiorno, princi. That's my Roberto Benini. John, it's me, Mario. Buongiorno e buonasera. Now you
want German accent?
Please.
I could do the intro in German. I could go.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. This is the #1. This is the internet's #1 comedy podcast about the ways that technology is changing culture and so much more. My name is Alexander, and I've gone back to Russian again.
I like a deep Russian.
That was me falling out of a plane or being thrown down a hole. I go.
You slipped into Russian and you were punished. Love it.
What I wanted to say was, hang on, reverb off. What I wanted to say was, I was at a barbecue a couple of weeks ago and I ran into a friend of mine and I was talking about the podcast. They were not as familiar with it as they should be. They asked what it was about. I explained it's a comedy podcast about the ways technology is changing culture and so much more. They said, look, that's great. Can you give me an example? And I said, look, I'm going to give you what's coming up in the next week's episode. I'm going to give you a sneak preview. And I had written on my list, nude German man has laptop stolen by Bohr photograph. And I asked her if she was familiar with this photograph. She was not actually. In the year, so I'll just explain this to you. In the year 2020, and I've just sent John this, I'll bring it up on the screen for the YouTube viewers. In the year 2020, there were a bunch of beautiful Berliners bathing. That's good alliteration. There were a bunch of beautiful Berlin bathers at a famous Berlin lake called Teufelsee. And somebody managed to snap a picture of a nude German man chasing after a wild boar who had stolen his bag and was running off with it. The boar apparently assumed that the bag had food in it. And so there's this incredible moment that was captured by a photographer. I think there's actually 2 photographs that exist of it. It looks like from the article captured by 2 different photographers. But it's one of those photographs that you just go, wow, I cannot believe that somebody captured this incredible moment on film. It's a beautifully framed photograph. The German man is somewhat heavy set with a bit of a stomach. He looks to be about 60 years old. He's clapping after a boar, and it's baby boar pigs as it takes off, and you can see everybody at the lake laughing, going, this poor man is chasing this wild boar that's stolen his bag. And the reason that I had this on my fun list of topics is because I was thinking for some reason this photograph came into my head again recently, and I thought, this is the kind of image now that would just be able to be generated with AI and like so quickly, because it is kind of a bit blurry, and it is the kind of image that, you know, like if somebody sent this to me today and I didn't have any
Yeah.
context and it wasn't in The Guardian, then I would probably go, oh, that's
Yeah.
like an AI image. And I was thinking, I was just thinking like, are we going to care about images like this anymore? Will people just eventually will their dopamine receptors be so fried by incredible photographs of things that never existed that when a photograph actually is real, people will just be like, not only, even if you could convince them, if you go, no, this really is a photo of a boar that stole a German man's laptop. I wonder if the next generations will just go like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if it's real or not. So that was the context of the conversation with this friend of mine when I was explaining the kind of hilarious things that we talk about. And what she told me, which I thought was very funny. And it's funny that she told me this without even realizing that this is exactly the kind of thing that the podcast is about. She said to me, oh, that's funny that it's about a boar, because I went camping recently with my boyfriend and we were in the tent. We were in the tent and there was wild boars sniffing around our tent. We could hear them at night and we were terrified. And so what me and my boyfriend did, terrified in our tent, is we went on ChatGPT and said, what do you do when a wild boar is sniffing around your campsite when you're camping? And I was like, wow, that's so DPTM. You're out in the forest camping, a boar is bothering you, and both of their first thoughts was already, I'm going to get on ChatGPT and I'm going to ask ChatGPT what to do in this boar situation.
It's funny, isn't it? Because that technology firstly hasn't existed for very long at all, but it's already implanted itself as like second nature.
Yeah.
I guess because we were already Googling and now we're just like, well, if I Google wild boar tips, that I'll just probably get a fucking recipe for wild boar.
Yeah.
I need something much more specific.
It's true. Or it'll give you it's that extra friction point where if you go to Google and you say, what do I do if a wild boar is sniffing around my campsite, and it's going to give you like 10 links to pages then that you have to decide which one to go to, and then you have to dig through the article to find if the information is in there, as opposed to ask ChatGPT like a person. It instantly gives you the answer that you want.
Albeit couched in a bunch of claptrap marketing and risk management speak, where it'll say,
it is important to note.
It is important to note that in some jurisdictions, boars are protected species, which limits your options in this scenario. Boars are also sentient creatures who can experience pain and pleasure and must be respected for their autonomy.
It's important to note that boars are a marginalized species of animal, and you are to proceed with caution. So that was very... go on.
Do you remember what she said to do? Just for our listeners who might find themselves in this situation. It's a big problem with wild boars in Australia, actually, in some places.
Is it? Do we have wild boars? I didn't know that.
Yeah, we got just wild pigs. I don't know if they're different from European boars. They might be, but they're big and they're very clever and very hard to eradicate because of their cleverness. They will deliberately confine their territories to protected areas and so on where they know they won't get hunted. I recently went to a curry night. Shout out to Jess and Rob, who were kind enough to host. It was a bit of a potluck and everyone brought different curries, and Jess made a goat curry which was made from Australian feral goat. She found this company online, and because she's somebody who enjoys meat but has ethical concerns about eating farmed meat, so she found this company that basically specializes in meats that have been hunted, and they're all pests basically in Australia. So there's boar, there's goat, I think there's rabbit, things like that. So that was good. I had very serious stomach problems for a few days afterwards, but the meal itself was delicious.
Yeah, that wild animal had just been eating trash for like its entire life, unfortunately.
It was cannibalizing other goats and did terrible things to me when I ate it.
It had just been drinking from the local nuclear power plant. Unfortunately, it would have been much better if it had been farmed and fed a diet that you could control.
Exactly. Yeah. If it was just a nice grass-fed goat that had been killed at an appropriately young age, but it was just a mangy old goat that had been drinking from a uranium tailings dam.
So when I wrote to you in the week and I said, I want to talk about ChatGPT and boars, you said, that's not really what I want to talk about. I want to talk about satellites.
It's true. What a great text exchange. Yeah, I mean, anyone who was tuned in last week, and if you haven't listened, go ahead and take a listen once you've heard this episode. But I was fascinated by recent goings on at the International Space Station. And, you know, it's a fascinating place, in part because it's been up there for so long. It's been up there for, a quarter of a century, and yet, I don't know, it's not something that's talked about a lot. It's kind of, it seems so futuristic, even though it's kind of old technology. And I feel a bit that way about satellites. I mean, satellites have been around for ages, obviously. And, they're whizzing around all the time. Sometimes you get little videos online, circulating online where they've caught the light and somebody's like, oh, look, it's a whole string of SpaceX satellites just cooperating with the CIA. Good on them. And recently, though, people have been, and we've kind of touched on different aspects of this in previous episodes, people have been looking at new ways of, I guess, making satellites that are more bespoke, or making them do things that are more bespoke and more kind of accessible to the average punter. So to private companies, but maybe also to individuals. So I think on a previous episode, we talked about the capacity to get essentially a kind of on-demand Google Earth satellite to kind of come and take a photo of a particular area that you're interested in. You could just give it the coordinates and pay like a relatively small amount of money, and then it would just, on its next fly over that area, it would take a little photo of that place and send it to you.
I mean, it seems crazy to me. Of course, this makes sense, but it does seem, there's something that seems crazy to me that just public companies can have satellites. There's something in my mind that is always just like, oh, isn't that something that the state controls? But a private company can just have satellites as well. They should.
Yeah, that's
not
right.
Having just the fucking government have all the bloody satellites.
Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, some of the stories I was looking at in the lead up to today, so a bit of a teaser. I'm going to be talking about basically the zoom in revolution in satellites.
The enhance.
And the kind of
the
enhance is one of the aspects of it. And it goes back to the 1980s. And at that stage, things were pretty different. The capacity for satellites to take photos was a lot more rudimentary. They certainly could do it, but the resolution was quite low. You might have to, I think at that stage, they were able to take photographs of anything that was kind of, less than, that was over about 30 meters or something. And it came to public attention then because of Chernobyl, because Russia had said, there was a slight malfunction, but everything's fine and there's nothing going on. And then America publicly released satellite photos it had taken. And I think a lot of people were surprised by the capacity to do this. And it ended up on the front cover of magazines and all this sort of stuff. They took photos basically of a flyover of that area, which showed the extent of the damage to Chernobyl and basically humiliated the Russians because they were just lying to everyone about what was going on. And so that's 1986. And then nothing happened until 1988 when the film Enemy of the State with Will Smith came out. And
1998?
1998, yeah. Did I say 1988? 1998. So another 12 years after Chernobyl.
Yeah.
Now, obviously that was 12 years of pretty intense technological development. And Will Smith his whoever wrote that film, I don't know, whoever the screenwriter was, imagined a much greater capacity of satellites to basically zoom in on individuals
Yeah.
and, you know, do so in real time. So there's these scenes where it's like, you know, it's kind of zooming in on him driving around in his car and going into the bunker or doing whatever he's doing. Now, apparently, one of the articles I looked at claimed that there was a guy working for, you know, like a kind of defense contracting company who saw the film Enemy of the State, and it sort of inspired him to pursue that technological capability. And so by the time of the early 2000s, they were starting to get pretty close to that kind of technology, in part due to a kind of project that he spearheaded because he was inspired, like so many people have been, by a Will Smith movie. But for whatever reason, in 1999, there was again a kind of a widely covered story on satellite capability. And by then, I think satellites were able to give you anything down to about 1 meter resolution, which was pretty amazing. So they'd gone from 100 meters to down to about 1 meter. And so, you know, any object that was smaller than 1 meter in diameter or whatever,
Oh, I see.
you wouldn't necessarily pick up, but, you know, it would just kind of blur out. But you could get a picture of like a, you know, complex in the desert or a missile silo or something. But that was, you know, that's now almost a quarter of a century ago. And a couple of things have happened. It seems to be that there's been some technological development, both in terms of the resolution of cameras and so on. Probably, I think, in terms of AI augmentation of photographic imagery as well, and its ability to kind of interpolate what's going on in an image, but also in satellite technology. So satellites some of them have become kind of smaller and sleeker and able to orbit at lower altitudes where they can get better pictures. And on top of all that, there's been, or at least under Trump, apparently, there was a degree of deregulation of this stuff so that people who were private companies who were interested in developing and commercializing satellite capabilities had fewer guardrails in place. And that inspired this company, this startup that was called Albedo. And it's just like two fairly young guys. And they've started making waves, particularly this year, having kind of been in operation now for a few years, for their capacity to get imagery, which really does get up to the kind of enemy of the state standard. So they're down to now about 30 centimeters. So you can look at really specific details.
You could get one of those. You could see a ruler. You could see a 30 centimeter ruler on a desk.
That's exactly the object I thought of, because that's my like archetype for a 30 centimeter object is a classic school issue ruler. Yeah, you could do rulers. You could certainly do meter rules that the teacher would use.
Yeah, architectural rulers. You get a much wider variety. That's the press conference. He said, we can now see a much wider variety of rulers than ever before with this satellite technology.
Yeah. The goal is, you know, more micro-stationary. Like you probably can't tell the difference between a pencil and a pen yet using a satellite. But, I mean, it's amazing.
That's the dream.
Because, you know, that's the dream. Because in addition to that, you've got this capacity. You've got so many bloody satellites whizzing around. You could use this technology, I guess, on any of them. And, you know, certainly the government, I'm sure, could kind of could sort of appropriate this technology that's meant to be for private commercial use for its own purposes.
Mm.
So naturally, a lot of people are kind of saying, look, you know, there's reason here to be worried. There were kind of various people I read about, Jennifer Lynch, who's part of this group called the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
Oh,
there's a guy at Harvard astrophysicist.
Great first album.
Yeah, that's right. And they're all saying they're all saying we need to be a bit more alive to this possibility. Somebody from MIT said soon satellites will be able to watch you everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of pretty weird. Like even in your backyard or sunbathing.
So,
you know,
I live on the top floor, John, and as you would know, I have like a loft window, and there have been times when I've been in my bedroom and I've been nude or whatever, and you can't see me from across. The buildings can't see me because I can't see them. It's on an angle, the loft window. So often all it can see is sky. And I have often wondered if I was a person of interest to a government, how much of me would they be able to see through my window?
When you're coming down after a heavy weekend.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm being spied on in my bedroom.
After the nightclubs, I just cover myself in alfoil in that room and into a ball. I crawl into a ball just like, and I look like a giant one of those American style popcorn poppers that you put on the stove that maybe everyone remembers. Drew Barrymore making at the start of Scream before she's murdered. I look like a big one of them. John,
remember that.
Back to you.
Can I? Thanks. But can I complement that with? So that's kind of something that's been rattling around since earlier in the year. Something a bit more fun and frivolous has come up in the last few weeks, which also demonstrates the burgeoning potential of satellites. And that is a project that's being worked on by a startup called Reflect Orbital. And what they want to do is basically allow you to, so I'll give you a scenario. Let's say you're down at Goolwa. I know you love it, on the South Australian coast.
I do.
And we're going down the beach. It's 1 a.m. We've had a few beers. We want to have a dance and have some suds. But I forgot to plug my phone in and I haven't got any torches. So what are we going to do? So you open this app, your Orbital, Reflect Orbital app, and you say, hey, here's where we are. You've got a little map that opens up. You click where you are on the map. And then suddenly a light comes shining down from the sky because Reflect Orbital have used their cluster of satellites to just angle the sun's rays onto that specific spot on Goolwa Beach.
Wow.
So you can have a little midnight party and it'll feel like it's the middle of the day.
Just like the Truman Show.
Exactly like the Truman Show. That's right. And they've so far, they released this video and everyone was kind of totally gobsmacked, and then they had to admit, look, this was just kind of a concept video, and people were like, well, maybe they used drones or whatever. And they've used other things like hot air balloons in the past to kind of workshop this technology. But in the next few months, they're planning on actually launching a little fleet of satellites. And of course this video, I had a look at it, and it is just kind of completely otherworldly. This idea that you could be on a rooftop in New York with no direct light, and then you're like, suddenly someone's like, let's fucking get some sunlight up in here. But
the rest of the city would be dark. So you'd have this,
exactly.
Your rooftop would look like the daylight.
Exactly.
Except everything else would be, I can't even picture what that, because that's just not a thing that's ever existed in the history of the world, is a small section experiencing a kind of daylight.
Patch of sun.
Yeah.
And people are wondering, will the mirrors be, will the reflective capacities be as precise as they're promising, and so on. So, could be that the whole block is illuminated and everyone's angry and waking up. But
I mean, it would be perfect for
see.
sport.
It would be ideal for sport. Yeah, it would be good for certain agriculture. Like if you wanted to really supercharge your crops, you could say, I don't need to worry about the fact that the sun's going down. I'm just going to keep these babies cooking. Would be good for solar panels. People are suggesting maybe you could use it for solar farms.
Of course, just have it just like 24-hour, 24/7 sun. Like that's so bizarre. Like these little pockets of Earth that never see night. Never see night.
Yeah. And, that's the thing. There's these huge kind of solar arrays that they're thinking about building, in the South Australian outback and other similar places. But you imagine those places you go out there in the middle of the night and it just looks like daytime on this field of solar panels because they're just getting permanent sun.
Imagine what that would look. Imagine that would look like. You'd be on the highway and you'd look to your left, and there would just be beams, columns of light, like shooting down in the nighttime, illuminating solar areas. What would you use one for? And don't just say barbecue.
Doxing, probably. It's probably a bit of doxing.
Yeah, that'd be great. This would be the equivalent of swatting somebody.
Exactly.
To just shoot a bunch of fucking sunlight in their house.
Yeah, a bunch of pesky, sorority girls or fraternity boys would do it to the dean of the college. He'd be asleep in his house, and then suddenly he'd get Louis Louis playing, and then just sunlight streaming through his window. He'd
pulling the blinds down, going,
"It's morning already."
It will a while. Yeah, I couldn't believe that.
So,
when you first sent it to me, I was like, "Is this for real?"
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It seems unreal, and I can't wait. As always, my concern is to try and break people's brains with this technology.
Yeah,
my mind often goes to sending that out to remote places where people don't understand what's going on and just shining sunlight on them.
The use for you would be turning it on uncontacted tribes.
Yeah, that's right. And they would just think it was the apocalypse. That'd be so cruel.
Filming the result, putting a bunch of hidden cameras in and just making a whole TV show just shining light at night, beams of light at nighttime on uncontacted tribes and seeing how they react.
Amazon villages, and they're just going, fucking hell. Could these people get any more annoying? So that's exciting. There are some sinister developments, and there are some beach party potentialities.
It's just making me think. The first thing it's made me think of when you said that is it would solve the problem of not being able to play beach football at nighttime as they do in Point Break. That's the problem that they faced when Johnny Utah was with Patrick Swayze, and Patrick Swayze was on the beach and they were doing a bonfire, and they wanted to play nighttime American football. And what do they have to do?
Right.
They had to turn the headlights of their cars on like a bunch of morons so they could light the beach with headlamps from their cars, which is obviously not great for the environment, drains the battery of your car, and the lights pretty shit as well. That's really the main use that I was thinking, is that if they did Point Break 2, which I can't wait for, which, by the way, would star a now 60-year-old Keanu Reeves as of the last few weeks. Wow. And 60-year-old Johnny Utah, they're gonna say, Johnny Utah, I remember when you were on the beach and you did really well at American football and we did the headlights. Let's do that again. And then he goes, yeah, let's do it again. But this time I got something different. And he clicks his fingers and then all the sunlight shoots out of the sky and everybody goes, oh, because we have that technology now. And I'm really enjoying Point Break 2. I'm glad we paid admission.
Glad we paid admission, and I miss Patrick Swayze.
I miss Patrick Swayze.
And Gary Busey looks very much worse for wear, but I like the lights.
John, I've got some real exciting news because we are the number one news source for this particular news story. And so you need to turn to Don't Praise the Machine when you want Rachael Raygun update.
Raygun.
Rachael Raygun. Rachael Raygun. Oh, sorry.
Turn that bit off.
Nice.
Olympic breakdancer Rachael Raygun.
We need to put some Ray gun sounds in there.
I know. Choo. Next week I need to get the sound effects in. So I've been waiting with bated breath, John, because widely mocked Australian Olympic female breakdancing entrant. Rachael Raygun has gone silent since the attention that she received following her widely accepted as a failed attempt to perform breakdancing at the Paris Olympic Games 2024. Now, the thing that interests me the most about this, as I've mentioned, I'm taking a different angle on this, which is, and this is the Don't Praise the Machine is the only place you're going to get this angle, and that's the really interesting. This is the nuance. This is the interesting angle.
Yeah,
it is.
We're not bullies, but we're also not just kind of bleeding heart saps either. We're realists.
Not bullies. We're not bleeding heart saps. And our fascination is how people are able to turn being mocked into to reframe it as a no, I did something funny and joyous and positive, which is obviously isn't what happened. But for some reason, we on the internet, everybody has to go down that angle, and she hasn't responded until in full. She did a tiny bit on Instagram, but this week was really her first full interview, which she did with on Australian television program The Project, and she was interviewed by Waleed. Now, John, did you see
Waleed Ali?
Did you see any of this interview?
I did see a couple of bits. Yeah, as a resident of Melbourne, we get free admission to the Project taping, so we just wander in and out as we please. No, I did watch a few highlights, and yes, I'll let you ask me some questions based on that. I won't try and steal the mic.
What was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was that I thought that, frankly, that Raygun had a slightly unusual affect, that some of the emotional exchanges were a bit kind of rehearsed and peculiar. And some of that might come from the fact that she hadn't quite resolved, how am I going to discuss this as a narrative? How am I going to kind of characterize it for people? So there was moments where she was going, Waleed would say, has it been fun and funny? And she'd say, yes. And then, are you traumatized and sad? And is it hateful? And she'd say, yes. And I'd think, what is this? What am I supposed to make of this? Because, 1 minute she'd be saying, she'd be telling this quite funny and relatable story about how she did this, performance. And then her coach was like, maybe stay off social media for a bit because there's this kind of furor. And then she went on social media and she was like, wow, this is really surreal. But then she kind of segued into, and then I read some of the comments and I was really hurt by that. And then she said, like, I apologize to what it's done to the breakdancing community. And I was like, I don't really know what you're talking about there, but And then there's a lot of use of some familiar terms like hate and community. And I saw in some of the comments people were sort of saying, let's not. Some people were saying, good on you, Raygun. And that's part of my reaction too. But then some other people were saying, let's not, kind of make this into some terrible tragedy. Like she just didn't dance very well and people didn't like it. Is that hateful? I don't know.
Did you find her likable? Did you think I'd watch a show that she's on? I'd watch I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here featuring Rachael Raygun.
You know who she reminded me of is a kind of Rachel Dolezal type figure.
Okay.
Like she had a kind of strange. That's what I mean. She's like, I don't know. I don't want to be mean. I thought she was. She came across as a sort of slightly, and it's not easy to just go on the project and be your authentic self. But I didn't really feel like I was getting her authentic self, or I felt like she hadn't really quite come to terms with what had happened in a way that made sense. So, yeah. But look, these are just off the cuff reactions. What was your? I feel like you've probably unpacked it a little bit more studiously than I have.
I watched the whole thing, and I took a few notes because I'm just interested to see what the next step is, and if she's going to try and monetize the attention that she's been given, and then how do we go about doing that? Because she's not somebody who's become famous for jogging across Africa. She's not somebody who's become famous for pulling a drowning child out of a lake. She's not become even like Hayley Hocktour. Hayley Hocktour became famous for saying something funny and charming in a few words. She's become famous for failing terribly at something and being widely mocked. And so the question is always, it's so funny because everybody seems to agree that you can just turn any attention into a career these days if you're deft enough and you get the right representation. But I just wanted to touch on a few bits in the interview that she said that really caught my ears. So asked by Waleed, I thought it was a very like kind of lame softball interview, by the way. Like I think Waleed should have sort of asked some. I do think like what I want to hear somebody say, because what their the approach of the project was obviously, look, we'll just assume that everyone knows that you were widely mocked and that you understand that and we understand that and the audience understands that. So we don't need to say you are a goose. Like everybody's laughing at you because you're a goose. That's why you're famous. But I'm like, no. Yeah. I think that is kind of that's kind of what needs to be said to some.
Acknowledged.
Yeah, acknowledged. Exactly. And then it's like, that would be my question. I'd be like, Rachel, everybody was laughing at you because they think you did very badly. What's your response to that? Like, that's the question Waleed should have asked. But
the closest he got, and I only saw a few highlights, was I think he said something like, do you think you're Australia's greatest breakdancer?
Yeah.
You know, do you think you're the best we can offer? And she was like, well, my record speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And what he should have then said is, well, your record includes becoming an international laughingstock. So that would suggest the answer is no.
The first question that he asked that really caught my ears is he said to her how she was doing. That was the first thing that he asked. Right, and he keep calling me a Raygun, which is just, I don't know. I find there's something about that sort of rubs me the wrong way. Is when people calling her Raygun, like just call her fucking Rachel. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, do I get to pick a silly nickname and then everybody just calls me that in serious interviews? Like,
yeah, I want to go on the project, talk about law reform, and they just call me 8-ball for no reason.
So asked how she was doing. She responded,
"Yeah,
it's been a pretty wild ride. I've had my ups and downs, but it's been amazing to see the positive response to my performance. And I never thought I would be able to connect with so many people in such a positive way." Now that needed a little pushback from Waleed, because I would have said, positive response to your performance. Could you just unpack that a little bit? Like, what was the positive response to your performance? And she'd go, oh, well, people writing to me and saying we really enjoyed that. And, and then I would stop her and say, oh, do you mean like Adele, how Adele, the singer, was on stage and she said that your performance had brought her a lot of joy? And then Raygun would have gone, yeah, I guess I'm referring to that. And I'd be like, she was laughing at you. Everybody was laughing at you. Like, that's why people are saying that they've had a positive reaction. That's not people going, I enjoyed laughing at you. That's not a kind of positive thing if you ask me. What do you think of that?
No. Yeah, I think that's fair. And then she'd say, somebody on my team said, well done.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, yeah, fair enough. It wasn't universal. It was everyone in the world. And then like maybe your boyfriend and your teammate who were fans.
Yeah.
But like pretty negative. And also it kind of, I'm not sure that, anyway, I don't know that really makes sense.
Yeah.
To say, I brought a lot of joy to people. I mean, well, perhaps you have at your own expense, but that's not
like Tommy Wiseau in the room
you set out to do.
Yeah. Jimmy Fallon sketch, where Jimmy Fallon invited that SNL woman on to do a little parody of her, which got a lot of attention. She said, I have mixed emotions. I don't know whether to hug him, Jimmy Fallon, or yell at him, because what a platform he ended up giving me. And then said, I haven't actually seen the sketch yet because I'm not in a place yet to watch it. So she's gone the whole, oh yeah, you're trying to put me down? Well, you just went and gave me even more attention, which makes me think that she really does have her eye on a little bit more of a career after this. So I don't know whether to hug him or yell at him. So I guess that depends on I guess.
Why would you hug him? He's made fun of you.
Making fun of you. A lot of the response. Okay, so then I asked about her unique performance. She said a lot of the response was from people not being very familiar with breaking and the diversity of approaches. But then she said it was fantastic that the next day that the judging chair, who goes by the name MG, it was fantastic that the judging chair MG came out and explained that in the breaking community, what I did actually wasn't very shocking. It's just a different approach. You have the athletic style breakers and the artistic style breakers, and all of them are very valid styles. To which I would have replied,
well, didn't you get any points?
You didn't get any points. Which Waleed did not say. So why didn't you get any points if that style was so familiar to the judges? You know, if they were so familiar with the diversity of styles, then why didn't you get any points?
I mean, if they, I accept that what she's saying is probably correct, that there is a variety of different approaches and that somebody who's kind of, a bit older compared to a 19-year-old who can leap around and contort their body is going to adopt a different approach. But yeah, if she'd done that well, then there would have been a different outcome.
Look, there's a variety of different approaches to the pole vault, and I can show you mine, and it's a different approach, and I would go so far as to say that it's valid. But if you were to see it, you'd go, oh, nobody wants to watch that. What the fuck are you doing here? Get out of the stadium.
You can't. You'd say, this is valid. Can I go to the Olympics? And they'd say, no, definitely you can't.
And then this one I don't think has been picked up by the media. Maybe it has, but I read a few media articles and I don't think any of them picked this up. So I'll be interested. This to me sounds like very lawyered talk. So here's what Waleed said, and here's her response, and I'll see what you think about this. Waleed said to her, so she said, he said, should you have won? Should you have been in the Olympics? And she said, well, I won the Oceania Championship to be chosen to be the person who goes to compete in the Olympics for Australia. And so Waleed asks, did you know anyone who was involved in making the selection or any of the judges? To which Rachael replies, there were 9 judges, all from overseas. I don't think any of them have judged anything that I've been in before. Now, that's not an answer to that question. So, again, the question is, did you know anyone who was involved in the selection or any of the judges? Now, that's a yes or a no question. Yes, I did know some of the people involved in the selection of the judges, or no, I didn't. But she said there were 9 judges, all from overseas. So none of them were, none of them were from Australia. They were all from overseas. And I don't think any of them had ever judged anything that I'd been in before. So I'll be interested to see if she did actually know. So go on,
Well, Waleed has a law degree from the University of Melbourne.
Is that true?
He should have seen that. Like any good cross-examiner, he would have gone, oh, I'm going to circle like a shark here and just say to her, sorry, can I just put that to you again and listen carefully to the question that you're being asked?
And then just an interesting follow-up after the interview with Waleed is that her Instagram has changed wildly since she first.
Oh, really?
At least the profile part of her Instagram account. So when she first performed at the Olympics and everyone started rushing to her Instagram page, which she'd had for years just as an Australian breaker, I think it just was like I think it was just like, I don't know if it had a link or anything. And now there's a huge link tree with like shitloads of like so
Yeah.
many links to things that she's done in the past and interviews
that.
and all this, which I'm pretty
All her
sure,
academic articles.
yeah, which wasn't there a few weeks ago, I do not believe. And the most important thing is that the top link on her Instagram page now says, if you want to talk to Raygun, you got to contact bornbredtalent.com.
Wow.
Now, I'm going to send this to you, John, because this appears to be a very Australian talent agency. I'm going to send you the link, and you can perhaps tell me if you know anybody else who any of these. So
Do you know anyone? And I'll say there are 9 clients, and
and I do not
don't
believe I do not believe that I've ever communicated via email with any of them.
Born bred talent.
So
Okay.
the inspired unemployed guys, I do know they're the first face that comes up, and it's fun.
I mean, I think it's. Let me see. Okay, Adam, Faruja, Alex, blah de blah. I don't know them. Wait, is this the? Yeah, okay. Don't see any names that I recognise actually, but I'm not exactly. Oh, except for the inspired, yeah.
yeah,
I'm not exactly my finger on the pulse. Maybe the Curve. I think I've seen them before.
yeah. So
Yeah.
So again, I can't wait. I just want to see what the next step in this journey is. Can she become a household? I mean, I sent you an article also earlier in the week that said that like a PR media person was saying that she had perhaps missed the boat and that she should have been out doing interviews straight away, that she should have been on those talk shows like Jimmy Fallon the week that her Olympic performance came out, that she should have like struck while the iron was hot and started running around. But again, I mean, it would have been quite difficult for her personally, because that was, despite whatever you think of her, it was a pretty awful thing to go through at that time. And also, like I keep saying, it's such a tricky narrative to frame, because what if she goes on Jimmy Fallon? What's the angle? What's the questions that he asks, and how does she answer them?
Yeah, it is true. It is difficult. I mean, that's right. I have quite a lot of sympathy for her, because I think, the reality is, I mean, we were kind of speculating early on, we were essentially repeating the speculation of others that maybe she'd done this in a kind of meta way to fuel her research or to sort of challenge the paradigm of breaking or something like this. But the reality that seems to have emerged, unfortunately for her and for people who kind of took delight in criticizing her, is that she just did her best and it wasn't that good. And
that's right. That's exactly it.
And so, it's a hard thing for her to go like, oh, well, I guess I have an opportunity here, but it's sort of an opportunity that is tied to this fairly humiliating reaction that I received for a performance that wasn't meant to be bad. And how do you do that? I mean, I think you've got to kind of, like, the Hawk Tour scenario is a contrast in a few different ways, but because you might think, well, there's a lot more to Hayley Hawk Tour than those few moments, and if I was somebody who'd said something dumb to a camera about giving a blowjob and then that had been all anyone had seen of me, I wouldn't be thrilled. So she might have reacted to that by going, everyone's writing all this hateful stuff about me, which a lot of people were online, and you can all get fucked. But she instead kind of just cut this very positive and self-aware figure where she was like, oh, I'm getting my 15 minutes of fame and it's kind of weird and funny, and I'll go on these talk shows and just be my charming self and kind of, laugh it off. And now she's got a podcast, I think. And
Hayley.
Hayley's got a podcast.
Yeah. That's great.
Called Talk Tour, which is great. And so she'll probably keep, capitalizing on it. And I guess she just has sort of slipped past there's still people who want to neg her and and say she has no right to be famous or whatever. But you've kind of just got to do the difficult thing of ignoring those people, I guess. And similarly, if I mean, it's easier said than done, but if Rachael Gunn had just kind of said, yeah, that happened and I wasn't thrilled about it, but now I'm just going to have fun being a celebrity and, you know, talking about the things I want to talk about or whatever, or maybe I'll start a podcast or something. But she doesn't seem to be quite there yet. And by the time she is there, the you know, public spotlight, much like a satellite reflecting the sun's rays onto a beach in South Australia, will have moved on.
That was masterful. Masterful, John. Well, I think we should leave that there for this for our weekly segment. Rachael Raygun
Update. That's the
Pew, 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 pew.
Yeah, we cannot wait to see what the next steps are and what the first thing that she appears on. If she appears on something and she's getting like a huge paycheck for it, because there's the talk is that Australian networks are fighting to sign her exclusively. So Channel 7, Channel 10 and Channel 9 are trying to get her to sign an exclusive 1-year contract where they just have access to her and they just throw her on whatever they think that Rachael Raygun energy is really going to suit.
What would you do?
Yeah.
The Masked Singer.
The Masked Singer?
Something like that.
The Lego show that Hamish hosts.
Lego show, yeah.
She could do that.
They certainly don't have any scripted options to put her on because they just run bargain basement reality shows now, all the networks. But
MasterChef?
Yeah, she could go on MasterChef.
She could be a bake-off judge.
Mm-hmm. That'd be good. Yeah, I mean, she's got academic chops.
That's true.
Maybe she could go the intellectual route and do a history of dancing.
Yeah.
For SBS. Not very lucrative.
Much more niche.
Much more niche.
A history of international dance for SBS hosted by Raygun.
Yeah, I mean, I can see her. I mean, this is a thing, you know, like the most obvious angle would be, okay, well, let's book her to talk about, for our corporate lunch to talk about like coping with humiliation or something. And she'd be like, I don't really want to talk about that. You know, She would be good on the corporate circuit. I think that is. Yeah. Yeah, man, I don't know. Tell me, John, am I overly interested in this? I sometimes feel like I'm just so interested in this because, as we've spoken about so much on the podcast, my number one interest on Earth is shame and how we navigate it as a people. This is what you've always enjoyed about me, is you've said, Alex, I love how deeply you think about the human emotion of shame and how we carry that around with us. It's true. Right from, you know, back when you approached me at high school and said, you know, what if one of those really beautiful it girls from our year 12 class just let out a huge fart at assembly?
How do you come back? How does that damage one's image? How do you come back from that? I would often talk about like, how does somebody recover from a extreme bathroom mishap? You know,
yeah, that's right.
Because we need to carry around with this air of cool, and shame really interferes with that. And how do you know? I've often talked to you about the Queensland poo guy who was like a business. What was he? Didn't he have a nickname?
The Poo Bandit.
The Poo Bandit, or
I don't know. It was probably something nocturnal, like Phantom Pooper.
Yeah, who was an older. He looked like about my dad's age, and he was the jogger, the poo jogger.
Looked uncannily like your dad, actually. Now I think about it. Yeah, the poo jogger,
who was a man in Queensland, I think.
Yeah,
who would go for an extremely early morning jog in the dark, and then he would take a shit on the same person's lawn in the same place quite regularly. I mean, his movements were quite regularly, and he would release his regular movements on these people's front lawn. And then somebody was just eventually was like, I've had enough of this. I'm going to put a secret camera and find out who's bloody doing this. And then it turned out it was like a man who I think had quite a high up position in an insurance company.
It was like, and he was like on the local council or something.
And you just think, that was like the most extreme kind of shame. That story, I just couldn't stop reading because I just thought, what is happening in that man's life? He's gone from being probably an upstanding member of the community that everyone thought they knew. And now, not only do people know that he's done this thing, but there's like a famous photograph of him sort of bewilderedly looking at a camera that's flashed at him as he takes a shit on somebody's lawn. Like, how does his dinner party...
I mean, quite apart from what was going on there, I'm not sure. But, because there are ways you can deal with that. Anyway, I'm sure that's all been explained to him now. but you don't need to shit on anyone's lawn.
How does he... How do his friends react? Like, how do you... Does he,
I know.
How does his wife react? Does his wife... Is that a divorceable offense? Does she say,
that's a good question.
I love my husband. He's done something weird, but it's not that bad because it's not really that. Yeah, it's not like a violent crime.
He's not a serial killer.
No,
he's got some complexities that need to be unpacked.
What would you do if that was me? Like, what if? And how would that phone call go? Like, you'd probably see it on the internet. You'd start getting a barrage of WhatsApp messages where it'd be like, "Have you seen the news? Have you looked at TMZ? Have you looked on BBC? Alex has been caught as a notorious serial doorstep shitter." And and you'd go, "No, he hasn't." And then there'd be a photograph of me going, "Huh?"
I mean, look, I wouldn't be totally surprised, to be honest with you. I'd be like, this is where a fixation on shame has led him. He's fetishized the experience of shame.
You'd go.
I remember when I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but you quite enjoy the idea of, I don't know whether you got something out of this, but I remember once you got off a bus and deliberately, like, in front of all the people on the bus.
Yeah, it was with you. It was with you.
It was pulling away. The bus was pulling off the curb.
On Main Road.
And I was remaining on the bus.
Yeah.
And then you went, bye, and like did a really exaggerated wave and then pretended to like trip over and fell onto the pavement. And everyone on the bus laughed.
Like
and then the old woman next to me, who must have thought, she was just a sweet, earnest lady who thought you'd genuinely fallen over and realized because we'd been talking before you got off that we were friends. She was like, people can be so cruel, can't they? And I thought, yeah, but they can, but your sympathy is misplaced in this case.
I remember the exact bus stop on Main North Road that I did it at. It was absolutely packed, and I remember going, "See ya, John, see ya," and then deliberately sort of launching myself like a pratfall and just going and flailing arms in the air. So so that's going to be my first book. It's going to be called Shame, and I'm just going to go through famous cases of people that have experienced extreme shame and then how they came back from it.
I mean, you should really do an experiment using yourself as the subject, where you become the poo jogger and see what it feels like.
Man, putting myself in that guy's shoes, it made me feel so terrible just thinking of your world collapsing,
It must just be that moment where you get up in the morning, or I don't know, I wonder how he first found out.
Imagine the feeling in your stomach.
Yeah, exactly. You just go, what the fuck?
We'll have to look him up. I'll look him up after this. I hope he's doing okay. He made a couple of mistakes on somebody's lawn. And we're going to check in on him, and we hope he's okay. John, do you want to see us out of the show today?
I want to say, firstly, can I just quickly mention something else as a way of, just so that our listeners know that it's on our minds. I want to send out my thoughts and prayers to anyone who is in or affiliated with the Crooklyn clan this week, because Fat Man Scoop, unfortunately, who many of you will know, Isaac Freeman III was his real name, has passed. So what I recommend is listen to this podcast and go and dance around the room to be faithful and think about, holding up $100 bill. Think about whether you're a single lady, maybe you put your hands up. If you're a chicken head, maybe you can be quiet and spare a thought for Fat Man Scoop. But otherwise, I want to say thank you to the Poo Jog. I hope you're doing okay. Don't worry about it. Everyone makes mistakes and we all have weird recesses in our mind that sometimes compel us to do strange things. Similarly, Rachael, Raygun, if you're listening, our invitation to come on the show remains open.
Explore.
We'd love to hear from you.
Explore the shame with us. Tell us what's going on.
I hope you're doing well. I'm not a fucking Melbourne private school know-it-all like Waleed. I'll give you a proper interview.
All right. Then I want to say thank you, everybody, so much for listening to this episode of Don't Praise the Machine. If you want to support the podcast, don'tpraisethemachine.com. No, if you want to support the podcast, you can find the Patreon. Lots of bonuses. We just released our first ever bonus episode of DPTM After Dark. If you join the Patreon, you get access to that straight away. Patreon.com/DPTM or just search Don't Praise the Machine Patreon and we are the first link that comes up. And we can't wait to see you next week.
The podcast.